Have you ever looked at the prices of some pets and thought, is it really worth it? There's an expression that goes, you pay for what you get. Basically meaning that you may pay a lot for a particular item, but it's most probably worth it. But when we're talking the realms of hundreds of millions, if not billions, just for a single pet, a little creature who just follows you around, then understandably a lot of people begin to question if it's really worth paying the money. So we're gonna take a look at a few popular damaging pets, put them to the test, compare them, and basically just see if any of them are worth the money, or if the more expensive pets are worth the increase in coins. Now, to start off with, we need some base figures. Now, understandably, some pets will be better for things like melee or bow damage, whereas other pets will be better for essentially mage damage. So the two cheaper control pets that we're going to be taking a look at first of all is number one, the sheep pet for mage damage, and then the tiger pet for melee and bow damage. Now, I'll be using the same setup for mage, obviously changing the pet, and then a different, but obviously the same consistent setup for melee as well, but changing the pet again. So we're using Aurora with the goggles, we're using an Implosion belt, Gauntlet of Contagion, and then everything else is Mana Pool, Mana Regen. We're using a Hyperion, and the Bizarre Power Stone. Our damage towards regular hub zombies, let's see, is around about 2.2 million. Okay, seems pretty standard. Our damage in the end is very similar at around about 2.2 million per hit, give or take. And our damage in the Crimson Elves is a little bit lower at 1.7 million. For about 11 million coins, the sheep pet is actually quite good. It gives you intelligence and ability damage as standard, reduces mana cost of abilities. Of course, it's actually great for dungeons as well. If you put a textbook on this, then you'll gain even more mana. Of course, majority of people are going to want a Turtle Shelmet for majority of activities. Okay, next up we move on to this Ender Dragon. We're going to stick with Mage for now. This Ender Dragon is tier boosted, but for the premise of the video, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference, considering, I mean, a tier boosted Ender Dragon still behaves as a regular legendary Ender Dragon, only you can't put a different pet item in there. And to be honest, you'd probably want a Shelmet anyway, so for the purpose of this, it's not going to make too much of a difference. But other than that, the rest of the setup is exactly the same. We were previously dealing around about 2.2 million damage to these hub zombies. I'm trying to isolate one of them on their own, because otherwise we're going to get a big figure. Okay, here we go. And now we're dealing around about 2.3, which is a little bit higher than we were with sheep. Yeah, around about 2.3 seems to be relatively consistent. 2.33, yeah, about 2.3. Now, our damage in the end is understandably considerably higher. We're doing around about 3.3 million damage, which is obviously really, really, really good. So just from going into the end, that's a whole million damage increase. But of course that makes complete sense, considering the Ender Dragon has the End Strike perk, which means that you deal 200% more damage to end mobs. And now for the Crimson Isles. Our damage in the Crimson Isles is around about 1.7 million, which is actually relatively low, but that's kind of similar to what we saw with the sheep as well. It does make sense considering the Hyperion has Smite on it, and of course we're not really feeling the impact of Smite when we're killing these mushrooms. Also, do you like the fact that this Gdrag and this Gdrag are both candied? Hehe. But in seriousness, the Ender Dragon is a solid pet, and for a long period of time, it was the best pet in the game. It gives you strength, crit damage, and crit chance as base stats. Of course, like I mentioned, the End Strike ability, meaning that you deal more damage to end mobs. It buffs the aspects of the dragons, which isn't massive. And it also increases most stats by 10%, which is of course a really good stat to have. Now, the E-Dragon that we're looking at in this video is worth around about 600 million coins, give or take, considering it is tier boosted, with true legendary level 100 E-Drags easily over 800 million coins. In terms of mage, you have a pet that is really good in the end, and realistically pretty good everywhere else too. Although, other than in the end, it isn't massively different to something like the sheep, and it's a lot more expensive. Okay, now we move on to the Gdrag. Our base damaging stats with the Gdrag to the hub zombies is almost 3.3 million, which honestly is insane. I don't really have anything else to say. Our damage with the Gdrag in the end is around about 3.1 to 3.2 million, which is really not too different to the E-Drag, around about 100k difference, maybe a little bit more. And then in the Crimson Isles, we deal around about, okay, we actually need to get a proper figure, 2.7 million, so by far the biggest damaging figure that we've seen in the Crimson Isles, by around about 1 million damage. Now let's take a look at the Gdrag stats. This is level 200 Gdrag, so it gives us plus 120 strength, plus 50% bonus attack speed, plus 24 magic find. It adds plus 100 strength to all golden weapons, grants plus 10 strength and plus 2 magic find to your pet for each digit in your gold collection, grants plus 0.5% strength per 5 magic find, gain 0.25 damage for every million coins in your bank, and for a level 200 is going to cost you over 1.2 billion coins. But it doesn't stop there. You realise that I read out this stat right here, which to be honest is probably one of the most important stats, which means that you gain 0.25% damage for every million in your bank account. So essentially, a billion in the bank is pretty much almost essential. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Gdrag's still going to be very good if you don't have a billion in the bank. And even not a level 200 without a billion in the bank, it can still be good. But if you want to actually see the full results, then this is kind of what you need to have. So the pet is essentially over 2.2 billion coins, because these billion coins you're not really going to be able to move until you get rid of your Gdrag. That's if you ever want to do that. Now, it is slightly less in terms of damage when you're in the end, as opposed to the Gdrag. However, in every other walks of Skyblock, the Gdrag's better. Full stop. But now we're going to move on to melee. But before we do, if you are planning on purchasing anything for the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. Also, you should subscribe to the channel. If you do watch these videos and you haven't subscribed, make sure to do so. And you should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer slayers and dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Now this time, instead of using the sheep pet, we're going to be using the tiger pet as basically the sort of base comparison. The tiger pet is going to give you plus 15 strength, plus 5 crit chance, plus 50 crit damage. The bonus attack speed is from the pet item, and plus 25 ferocity. His perks give you 30 ferocity, melee attacks reduce healing by 55% for 10 seconds. An Apex Predator deals plus 100% damage against targets with no other mobs in 15 blocks. We're using this Crimson setup with these Terra boots, all with Dominance 7. These equipment pieces all have Dominance 5 on them too. We'll be using the Hurtful Power Stone, and we're going to be using this Fell Sword. Don't ask why, I just still have it, and it's actually not bad. Okay, switch to the Tiger Pet, and let's test our damage. 441k, 442, 443, 501. Now, when the Apex Predator ability actually procs, so when there isn't really anything in range, we can deal close to 500k damage. But of course, that's not a guarantee. We're going to head over to the end, and the damage we deal to Enderman is just over 1 million. So sometimes closer to 1.1, but most of the time around about 1 million damage, which is actually pretty good. And in the Crimson Isles, let's see, we can't one-hit these, unfortunately. We deal around about 620k by the looks of things, give or take. If we can get anything else, yeah, 620. Something like that, so very similar to in the hub. Of course, we are using Crimson, so we can one-hit, because when the swipe actually comes along, we deal a lot more damage. But now, if we switch over to our Ender Dragon and do the same test, we now deal... What was that? Try that again. 542k damage, 530, 530. Quite a sizable increase, really. I mean, majority of the time we were hitting for around 420, 430 of the Tiger, and then when the ability kicked in on the odd time, then we were dealing around about 500. But even so, we are dealing more damage with the Ender Dragon, even than those lucky times when the ability actually kicked in. And yeah, consistently it looks to be around about 530 to 540k. But in the end, let's see, our damage is around about 1.3. Can we see any other damaging figures? 1.294. So yeah, around about 1.3 million seems to be around about right. Which is actually, once again, pretty good. Around about 300k more damage than we were dealing with the Tiger Pet. And then heading over to the Crimson Isles, we deal around about 728k. Let's call it 730. So yeah, once again, pretty substantially better than the Tiger, actually. What's that, around about 100k extra damage, which is not too bad at all. But now we've changed over to the Gdrag. And our damage to the hub zombies is going to be around about 670, 650. Looks like between 650 and 670. Okay, so once again, that's substantially better, about 120k more than the Gdrag, which is probably what you'd expect. Okay, so our damage in the end is around about 1.2 million on the first hit. Obviously, the swipe does a lot more. So it looks to be, yeah, around about 100k less damage than the Gdrag, which makes sense, of course, because the Gdrag is going to be way better against end mobs than pretty much any other pet. But there's not a huge difference, if I'm being honest. Now we're going to conduct the same tests, but now using our Terminator. Now we've changed the setup a little bit. So we're now using 3/4 Terror. Realistically, I probably should have a Warden helmet here, but I don't have it. I ended up selling it because I have no coins. I'm broke. So we're using this Crimson helmet instead. And then we have Dominance 5 equipment like we had before. We changed our Power Stone up to Fortuitous, so we can get that crit chance up. And we've given ourselves a little bit of extra bonus attack speed and crit chance too to make sure that everything should be good. Now I've got the Tiger Pet equipped, and it's time to do a bit of a test. So with our Terminator, it looks like we're dealing around about 324, 326k damage. 320 seems to be about right. Okay, against Enderman, we deal around about... it's looking pretty damn similar in terms of damage. Around about 340k damage, then we got 310. So it's looking very similar to against the Hub Zombies. Heading over to the Crimson Isles, we're looking to deal around about 270k damage, 319. It looks like we're more consistent at around about 300k damage, or around that mark, 290 to 300k. So that's what we're going to see. Okay, moving on to the Gdrag. And our damage now seems to be around about 350k towards the Hub Zombies. And yeah, against Enderman, this is substantially better. Looks like we're getting around about 500k damage or so. You try that again. Yeah, 526k, 525k, substantially better. And then against the Mushroom Bulls and the Crimson Isles, we look to be dealing around about 350 to 360k damage, which once again is very, very similar to the Hub Zombies, but actually substantially better than we were with Tiger. And now with the Golden Dragon, our damage to Hub Zombies is, well, let's see, is well over 400k, around about 430 to 440k, which is once again a substantial increase. Our damage with the Gdrag in the end is looking to be around about 510, or maybe just over 500k, which isn't too bad. Like I said, it's slightly worse than the Gdrag, but that's understandable considering the Gdrag is it's literally specifically geared towards doing damage in the end. But 500k damage as opposed to what, like 530 or something like that, isn't really too bad. And now the Crimson Isles with the Mushroom Bulls again. We're going to be dealing around about 440, which once again is pretty much the same as what we were seeing to the Hub Zombies. Yeah, 440, maybe 450. I mean, it's worth pointing out that this Terminator has Duplex, not Soul Eater, so if it did have Soul Eater, then we would be dealing more damage to these Mushroom Bulls than we were to the Hub Zombies. But yeah, it's still a fair comparison because we can kind of compare the pets, and that's all what we really need to do. Now, the thing that sets the Gdrag apart from every other pet is the fact that that's just ridiculously versatile, and for the most part, it's going to pump out some of the best damaging stats regardless of what you're using. The E-Drag and Gdrag are unique considering they're, well, realistically good for both mage and melee or using a bow. The E-Drag realistically is always going to be slightly better in the end because of its ridiculous buff to end damage. But basically what I'm trying to say, the point of this video is just to highlight the importance of investing in pets. Because just the insane increase that you actually receive from buying something like a Gdrag as opposed to using, you know, pretty much any other pet in majority of circumstances is ridiculous. And sure, you might still not think it's not worth the coins, and that's fine, because I guess that's going to completely depend on what point in the game you're up to. But trust me when I say it, for the most pets in Hypixel Skyblock, you pay for what you get. And when you get to a point where you have to spend a ton of coins to see relatively minimal increases in damage, the Gdrag, to be honest, is a breath of fresh air because its damage is so substantially better than pretty much anything else at pretty much any other point. It's crazy. But let me know what you think in the comments. I want to say as well that there are a lot more budget pets that you could contend with. Don't get me wrong, I acknowledge that 100%. If you did enjoy today's video, make sure you do leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.